the Agapostemons group. We have Denny Johnson here, who drafted that guide that I sent out in the email, your little document. We'll talk about the creation of that and how you can use it. I don't actually know that I have all that many announcements. Sam, do you think that we have any?
I can't think of anything. I would encourage people to share the fact that these classes exist with your colleagues and friends. You know, the bigger the better in terms of numbers of folks. So that's my only, I guess, message right now. And gosh, if it took us that long to get through all the genera, we got a ways to go.
I think we did that pretty quickly. 6 months?
Six months, no problem.
Yeah, so the thing I did want to say is that we are we're tidying up the genus cheat sheet and sending out a new big air quotes around master list. There's a couple other sheets on there that combine some of the Trachondrina and the Melandrina, some of the Laceuglossum subgenera, just, you know, quick characteristics. So those will be going out shortly after Sam adds Lithorodopsis, and I think it should be good to go. And yeah, and I have a nice running queue of species that you want to see us walk through. So I think we're going to keep proceeding like that on by request, and until the requests run out, then we'll just start moving through them in some other more orderly fashion. But it's evolving, so please let us know what you think. And without much further chit chat, I'm gonna turn it over.
All right.
And we do have a couple more new people possibly. So please know that the chat is how you communicate with me. If you don't have access to the chat for some reason at the moment, I have my email open, and I will interrupt Sam and Denny with your questions. That is for our new people. Okay, now I'm done.
All right, I'm trying to change. They changed my computer updates, and cursor size is change mouse pointer size. Is that the latest thing? Sorry, I know that. Okay, here we go. Got it, because that is useful. So today I'm introducing also Denny Johnson. He is a engineer, retired engineer, and very precise, and has been wonderful in collaborating on several different projects, and has created a wonderful guide to the Agapostemon of Wisconsin. So it turns out, though, that the Agapostemon of Wisconsin really goes for all of the eastern United States and most of eastern Canada in terms of the species composition. Once you start getting past 100th meridian, you pick up additional Agapostemon species. I'm not sure we're going to tackle them. I don't have a complete collection of those, but they might be mentioned. These give us enough headaches when we're starting out, so we'll start with that, and we may circle back, and we may also like to bring in additional people as long as we have the resources in either as a guide or specimens that we can look at from some of our Western colleagues at this point to perhaps do the Agapostemon of the Pacific Northwest. So we'll try and start talking to people about the possibility of bringing in additional experts. So today, I think what we would suggest is that everyone open up that document that Denny provided from Agapostemon in Wisconsin. You can see it on my screens, but you can play around with it on your own. And some of the screen characteristics might be small for you looking at the things online. Maybe I'll see if I can increase the, if I increase the size, I might, let's see if I can do that without messing up the formatting. Let's zoom to, we're at 100%, let's zoom to 200% and see, oh, that might be better. Okay, And Denny pointed out just a second ago, some of you may have heard that each of these pictures is live. So we'll try and expand them, but you can also expand them to see them better and things like that. So we talked, Denny suggested that we go through the females first. So I think we'll do that. And I'm going to see, I have specimens here. We were going to talk about Agapostemon virescens first, and I'm going to turn it over to Denny. What you're looking at on screen is a much poorer visual of a female Agapostemon than the photography that you'll see in Denny's article, but you get the sense of what that looks like. And I'm going to go back to his screen and say, Denny, how do you want to take it from here? You want to talk about the female Agapostemon virescens at this point?
Yeah, I think that's a logical starting point. Maybe a little prelude to that is we're in the green bees, which Agapostemon is one group, and that's in the Helictini tribe. The other group is the Algochlorini in the Helictidae family, and the thing that distinguishes the Agapostemon is in the photo 1 in my guide is the propodial shield. I call it a that unique feature will tell you it's Agapostemon and not any of the Algochlorini tribe. There's another green bee in Florida, the Euglossa, which it's a corbiculate apidae bee, which shouldn't be very confusing. It's much broader bee than the Agapostemon group. Anyway, if you see the shield, you know you have an Agapostemon. So to get on then with, let's see, there's 4 species in the eastern United States. There's virescens, texanus, sericeus, and splendens. So we'll start with the virescens, and the thing that's unique about virescens is it has a brown abdomen. The brown abdomen has basal hairs in each segment, which if you're looking at Agapostemon in the field, all of the males have a brown abdomen, but they have basal yellow and tegmental color, not by the hair. So with the female, it's the hairs, the basal hairs, and so it'll be a brown with a white basal hair base. That brown abdomen for the eastern Agapostemon is definitive in determining that you have a virescens. All the other females, the texanus, sericeus, and splendens, have green abdomens. That one feature alone will nail that down as being virescens. Then we can move on to texanus, which will have a green abdomen. But the thing that's a key feature for texanus in the group of the female is both the scutum and the scutellum are double punctate. So there's a sea of small punctations on the scutum and the and then almost in a grid-like fashion, much wider spaced, are larger pits. And so that sea of small pits with a grid of larger pits gives you the double punctation feature that will nail down texanus for this group. Other things about, let's see, and that I first photo in the middle group of photos shows that character quite well. Another thing about texanus is the pronotum angle is sharp. And the propodial triangle is striate. So those are features of texanus, but the really definitive one is the double punctations on the scutum and scutellum. So then moving on to, you have anything to add to that, Sam?
We have a question.
Okay.
Is there any way to tell a queen from a worker or the caste system in virescens?
I'm going to answer that and say no. There might be some size differences in the, my understanding would be that the F1, I don't know that queen is probably the better term, but the first generation, I think, overwinters as inseminated females, if I recall right. People can put into the chat if that's incorrect, and are probably a bit larger, but visually, I've never heard of anyone telling the F1 from the others. And it may not even be that big of a size difference.
We also have eastern species, meaning east of the Mississippi River, and about how far west will these species be encountered?
Oh, well, that's a tricky thing. So they will go, you can look at the Discover Life Guide to get the exact configurations, but these go all the way to the west coast, Texanus, where they are joined by angelicus. So we don't have any specimens right here. The notion, as of what I know, is that you can't tell the females apart when you have them, but the males have, Denny, you might know, but it's I believe that the males have slightly different patterns in the dark and light areas on, I want to say, the hind legs, but now I can't remember. Do you call
What two species were those?
I've not been able to separate them myself. All of the eastern ones are presumed to be texanus, but when you get into like Arizona and stuff, you can have both angelicus and texanus. Separation is difficult at best.
Yeah, I believe they're legitimate species, because I would be surprised that if nobody has actually looked for differences in molecularly, but I could be wrong. Maybe no one's looked. They are so very close, but I think right now we need to treat them as separate species. And so somewhere, again, it's that magical 100th meridian. You start having to deal with the fact that you might have both species.
So we have Will Peterman shared a Western key with me today that I'll send back out in an email. But he says that there's a difference in the stripes on the hind tibia per the OSU key. Yeah,
that sounds right. I believe that's in Discover Life, which does include all the Agapostemons, but I don't use the key out things to the west. So we're always interested in feedback about that guide, particularly for the Western species. I'm much more dependent on you folks for making corrections or suggestions for different wordings or additional characters. Should we go to sericeus?
Yeah. Yes. Let's. So virescens and texanus can be separated from this group by the features that we've discussed. But then we get to sericeus and splendens, and those can be harder to differentiate from each other. I mean, we've already been able to separate virescens and texanus. So with sericeus, one of the characters that separates them is the pronotal angle on sericeus is a sharp right angle. It's slightly obtuse, but for the most part, it's pretty much a right angle. And that wouldn't be true on splendens. So there's splendens, it's rounded, it's quite obtuse. So that is a character that will separate them. Another character that will separate them is the scutellum. So if let's see if I've got that in the, I don't have that in the guide. On sericeus, the scutellum is quite flat, and often there are shiny impunctate areas lateral to the an island on both sides of the center line that is shiny and impunctate. And in splendens, that scutellum is rounded and dull, and it's more or less double punctate. So that is another feature that will separate those two. You could, if you have a sample or Sam that you can look at under the microscope, sericeus.
Yep, I will.
Flat, shiny area scutellum should be.
I can find the specimen now. There we go. Get it in focus. Again, if you're holding this in your hand, I'm going to change the position so it gets a little bit better of a shot. If you're holding it in your hand, you can evaluate the flatness a little bit better than you can here. So you can see here's the specimen. Here's the scutellum. So the scutum is up there, just to orient people, metanotum, and this is the propodial triangle area. So here is what Denny is talking about, and we have splendens too, so we'll show that. And again, I'm afraid that our abilities here to get good lighting and is different from having to see a picture, but you can see what Denny's talking about at somewhat there. And then when we look at the propodial triangle, as Denny will probably mention, you don't see that inner green triangle sharply defined like in splendens. These are much more subtle than people realize, as Denny can speak for. Let's see if this one, we can find the sharp pronotal ridge angle rather. And I got to get the specimen there. So the target is near the X, and this is a common character at the species level in several of the halictids. There's a hair right in the way, but you can kind of see this pronotal collar angle is like this and like this. Several groups of halictidae in halictidae are differentiated in part. So these are nice to have several things with that. So back to you, Denny.
Yeah, the scutellum on the specimens, and I've looked at quite a few here, is impunctate areas much more definitive than you're showing. However, the shininess is there, and it is a little bit more sparse in those areas for punctation. But some of mine are like there's no punctation in the middle area of those two areas, whereas in the splendens, it's not shiny to begin with, and it's more rounded. It's not flat as it is in the sericeus.
Should I show splendens in the same place right now since we're talking about it?
Yeah, I think so, because I'm kind of working back and forth. These two are the ones you need to separate at this point.
So again, I think we're in the not the greatest. Let me get this angled because the pin head is in the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're seeing the limitations of technology here. So the pin, as I focus this, you'll see the pin is in the scutum. Here's the scutellum. Here's the metanotum, and here's this triangle, which Denny will probably mention, this little finer triangle, partially resolved. And we'll look at the, I'll magnify this, and we'll go back and take a look at the pronotal ridge, our collar, or the ridge of the collar here. But I just think that some of this, the reflectance on the surface is hiding some of the features that Denny is mentioning right now.
Yeah, you can see though how relative to the previous one, this is more rounded and there's no decrease in the punctation in those areas laterally from the center line, which is the case in the sericeus.
It's pretty much a solid mass of pits. So
yeah, right.
And just
there is a definite difference in the flatness between the two also, and
yeah.
Splendens being much more rounded.
Yep. You want to go back? Here's your document, and here is we'll decrease the sericeus one picture if I can get it, and then increase the splendens one. Should also point out that splendens is almost entirely going to be in an area with at least some soil component of sand. It doesn't have to be absolute sand, but when you get that, for example, dunes or lake edges or those kinds of places, the Agapostemon splendens can be unbelievably common. Like it'll fill your traps sometimes, but it also occurs at low levels in just, you know, sandy soil. So here's a, this is Denny's shot, and you can see it's a little bit out of focus, but see, he was talking about all the pitting being basically almost confluent, touching together. You can kind of see the roundedness here of the scutellum. Here's this inner green triangle that's got a different pattern of fine sculpturing. So Denny, you want to talk some more about?
Well, I have a question real quick. When you say splendens is more rounded, is that going to be best viewed from the side or from above like this?
Yeah, more mounded up. So yeah, if you looked at it from the side, it's more mounded. Sericeus is quite flat in those two. Move your cursor to the area on the scutellum there to where it would just in a little bit, right in there, slightly out from is the areas that would be flat or more mounded. So not on the center line, out laterally from the longitudinal center, down right there. Just out from that a bit.
I'm gonna take the specimen that I have on hand and see if I can, you know, if we can see that under the microscope.
Yeah.
I don't have my clay with me today, so I'm less able to hone in, but let's see what we got. You can also see that often Splendens has blue and purple components to it, but sericeus can too, so it's not an absolute thing. All right, so here we are, same specimen. You know, not the greatest thing, but you can see the roundedness here, I think is what Denny is pointing out. There's the midline, kind of depressed, and then here's the mounds that are going just like that.
Yep. In the guide photo of the old photos there, the fourth one down, which is of sericeus.
Okay. Let me get back to that. Let me try.
So that's splendens there, but in down the
Oh, further down?
next, yeah, the next group of, wait a minute, no, you were right. I wasn't seeing it all. There you are. You can see on that photo on the left there, way up at the top, you can start to see those flat impunctate areas there. They're just barely visible. I should have captured that in this photo, but anyway, I didn't. I barely captured part of it.
Next version.
You can sort of
Well, I
see
can take a
difference in
picture and
those.
modify the document and send it back out.
Yeah. Because it's fairly pronounced usually, and I thought a good character. Then moving on to what Sam's been referring to is in sericeus, the propodial triangle is coarse and straight, and with splendens, propodial triangle has see here. The propodial triangle has the triangle within the triangle, and it's by rugulae, not by color. So it's a finer textured rugulae inside that little triangle than it is outside. And so that's fairly pronounced in the female, where you can see on the left photo there that just the striate nature of the sericeus. So that's another feature that will separate sericeus and splendens.
You can also see that the all this sculpturing here is more almost random. It makes little chains and groupings. And in sericeus, you see that they form more of a longitudinal sets of rectangles. There's much more, let's call it striate in its nature. And this is more, I don't know what to call it, but let's call it chain-like or scale-like. And yeah, and you can see these things. Yeah, and Denny is absolutely right about color. So this is sometimes a slightly different greenish, but then sericeus, so this is where you can be fooled, because this area, that same area, can have a slightly different color in sericeus. But if you look here, the sculpturing between the two is really different.
And that's why in the guide we point out that difference in the triangle is by rugulae, not by color.
Yeah, and I should also point out that in terms of patterns, you can get tons and tons of virescens, tons of texanus, and tons of splendens in a sample. Like there'll be lots and lots. But my impression is, after looking at lots of these things, is that sericeus is more of a onesie, twosie thing. So they occur in almost any habitat, but usually you only get a few, whereas these others can be, the most common bee in a few cases and are often quite high in numbers. Sericeus never really gets to that same level of abundance. It's worth thinking about like why that might be from a ecology, life history point of view, but that's my impression. People should also be writing in their life history notes and what they find in the chat too. But Denny, is that your experience?
Yeah, except, well, yes and no, because splendens really doesn't come this far north in Wisconsin. So I don't find splendens here. It might be in the southern part of Wisconsin, but for the most part, the map exclude Wisconsin for splendens.
Yeah, I will make a note here that do you know Nolan? What is Nolan's last name? But anyway, Nolan has had a project. Pardon? Ammon, I think,
Ammon,
right?
I think. Ammon.
Yep. And anyway, Nolan has passed his collection by me a couple times from the cranberry growing area, which I believe certainly it's sandy and it's south central. And I've picked up a number of splendens in that area in Wisconsin.
Okay, yeah, that's south of me.
Yeah.
Some few years back, you and I discussed it and thought that splendens probably doesn't come this far north, but I have not found them anyway. But I haven't surveyed the southern part of the state, which one of these days I intend to do.
Well, he also, just as a side note, he also got tons of other sand specialists like Swanky, lazy glossum Swanky, lots of Virecki, they're loose strands. It was, and others, which I can't recall off the top of my head, but super big sand signal in that area. And he wasn't really hitting the sand prairies. So there's probably some really cool stuff to find in that area. Macropus too. So anyway,
yeah.
Put it on your list.
I get Macropus nuda here.
Yeah, that's what he had.
Yeah. So
we have two questions.
Okay.
Does date captured help with what you may have found?
I'm going to say no, because they are at minimum multivoltine, and just if you look at their, when they occur, it's throughout the whole season. In fact, splendens can put on a big burst down here in the mid-Atlantic on the coast with huge numbers, even in November, as they pump out males and get ready for the end of the year.
Yeah,
They're desperate.
Get a lot of the New England aster in the fall here. I get lots of. So I have Agapostemon all year long. I think usually there's two casts, or not casts, but two hatches of them through the summer. I don't know if there's more than that, but
yeah, I don't know enough about the like you mentioned, how eusocial they are. Again, if someone knows, go ahead and put that in. The other green bees, at least Algochlora pura and Algochlorella, I believe, are much more eusocial, with female sharing nest structures with the herd daughters and things like that. Now, I can't remember if that happens with Agapostemon. Surely that's known because it is one of the better studied groups.
Well, that segues nicely into my next question. Virescens seems to be a communal nester here in Vermont. Anyone know about the others? So maybe that's something we can take to the chat or talk about, in our loitering period at the end of class.
Okay.
And I just wanted to read out loud for people who don't have access to the chat. Our delightful Jean has given some context to what you were saying about the abundances in collection. So, for example, year-long cup survey on Poplar Island in the Chesapeake Bay caught 7 sericeus and 10,354 splendens.
Quite the ratio.
All right, so yeah, put in the chat if you have things to say about the communal nester Agapostemons, and I'm moving on.
Should we go to males, Denny?
well, one additional thing in the females while we're here is regarding the wings. The wings of splendens tends to be fairly, and the others more clear, although they tend to have hazy tips to the wings. But,
I have purposely left about 10 minutes for questions, but I'm
okay. I think I'm going to show that on my specimen here. You can see here is.
Yeah, can you actually repeat yourself? Some of that got cut off by the thing I just found to mute.
Oh, on the wings for splendens tends to be fairly smoky, especially the tips, but even the mid area of the wing is fairly smoky looking, where the three specimens, virescens, texanus, and sericeus, are relatively clear, although the tips might be a little bit hazy. They're much clearer than the wings on splendens.
Yeah.
So
So
that's another character.
So you can see that on screen. So sometimes it's difficult if you only have one specimen to get an understanding. Is it smoky? Is it not? But in big collections, they really stand out because of that. But it's almost never like definitive because it's hard to see.
Right.
Or it's hard to do unless you have comparisons. And that's why we want more museum collections and more private collections, so that you do, because ultimately your gold standard is to compare your specimen and your determination of that specimen to, I'm going to air quote, known specimens in collections. So you continue to support your local museums for that reason.
Yeah, that's true. All of these comparative characters, if you don't have something to compare it to, it's hard on its own to know what you're talking about. So, okay, then yeah, let's move on to the males. And so the males, all of the males have yellow-brown abdomens, the turga. And the
I think that's probably Claire's.
that was my phone. I just hung it up. Let's see. So they're yellow-brown abdomens, and the abdomen on the males is the main thing that we look at for the features to distinguish between the different species. So if we start out with the virescens, if we look at the sternum S5 and S6, which is shown in the first photo in the third group of photos, the virescens male. So we're looking at S5 and 6 there, and they're predominantly brown, very little, if any, yellow in them. There's a little bit of yellow on the apical edge of S5 there, but that's the rest of the specimens, the species will have yellow in them, and in fact a lot more yellow in some of them. Another feature, though, while we're here looking at S6, on the longitudinal line apically there's a ridge or a keel, and that's not present on the other ones. So this is another definitive character there on F6. So so for virescens, the brown S5 and F6 and the keel on S6 are definitive characters. So if we go up to S4 on this same photo here, it's the apical edge is relatively flat, and although there's slight swellings laterally, they're very small relative to the other species that we're going to look at. So that's a character for virescens, is that it's flat and for the most part not swollen. Another feature on the S4 is laterally on the apical edge, that thin apical edge there are no spine-like hairs. On the other specimens, there'll be 2 to 4 spine-like hairs. Of course, we're looking at the absence of something. So when we move on to the next one, you'll see what those spines look like. Let's see, actually on my very last photo in that group, you can see those spine-like hairs here, and this would be on sericeus. But you have to be a little careful in hunting for those. We're looking for in virescens for the absence of them. Sometimes because you're not in the plane of the hairs, you won't see them. Other times, these are quite brown in this sericeus photo here, but sometimes they're very transparent and very hard to focus on, very hard to see. So when you're looking for the absence of something, it might be misleading. If you don't see it, it still may be there. But anyway, that's another feature for virescens, is that it does not have the spine-like hairs. Another thing with virescens is, let's see, if you look at that photo number 9 down below there, Sam.
I don't see a number on it.
Well, there's no number, but it's the next to the last photo.
This one?
There.
Yeah.
You can see the greenish tint on the lateral sides of the. You won't find that on virescens. I don't find any of that greenish tint, which is actually a reflective interference color. So it's coming from multiple layers, and you have to have good light. I don't know. I use only daylight colored light, and if you're using the soft white, the yellow stuff, the 3000 K temperature stuff, you may not see some of this.
Yeah. I'll point out too that sometimes it's difficult to see that in texanus. So FYI. But yeah.
You have to actually move it back and forth and everything. You have to get the angles right to see that, because you have to see the reflectivity from different planes that causes this interference color to be there. So it's usually on most of the texanus, I see this, and some very pronounced. You can also see it on the S4 in the middle part of S4 on the sericeus photo to the right of it there, that glint of green, which these are interference colors. So you have to kind of move it around. If it's at the wrong angle, you may not see it at all. Or if it's opaque, if the layers are opaque enough, you may not see it.
So if you see it, you basically don't have virescens. If you don't see it, then look for more characters.
Correct. Yeah. Looking for the absence of something is tougher. But anyway, those are the things that on virescens.
So I'm just showing a illustration of virescens, and this is how Agapostemon males love to curl their abdomen and evert their genitalia. But all this brown down here is, after you do your due diligence of learning about Agapostemon, you just have to glance at it and go like, okay, that's virescens, and you can move on. And I can't even see a lot of the other characteristics because it's dark, it's curled, but at least I've got this notion that this is almost all brown down there, and that will eliminate most of the other groups. And a lot of times, virescens is often your most common species, particularly in disturbed areas.
I have a couple of questions to interrupt with real quick. While we're on the male abdomens, do males have 7 tergites and 6 sternites? Is the end, the 6th sternite, the elongated rounded one in the previous photo? So this one came in and might need you to unmute to clarify your question if it's not answered.
So I think they basically have it right. So tergites are usually easier in terms of counting, but doing male versus female determinations on tergite or sternite counts is tricky because different bee genera and even species have weird tendencies to retract or have hidden sternites. So if you dissected them, this is probably right here, peeking out is S7 probably. Andrina S8 is also visible. But as you move toward the end, everything starts getting to has the potential to be modified. Usually S1 and S2 and S3 are visible. And after that, you can get into non-visible segments in different groups. So, but on top, usually most of the time you can do a count of segments, but I always go for the antenna, or if there's some secondary characteristics for males versus females, and not on the abdominal segments because of that.
Yep, I have the same thing. Counting terga and sterna is not the most reliable thing. Antennal segments much more so.
Mm-hmm.
And the genitalia that's sticking out, I pull the genitalia on many of the males, so these I've pulled. Usually I can manipulate it and light it to see under it well enough, but I intended to do more study of the genitalia, and I know, Sam, you don't usually pull them. It's real time consuming for one thing. And
we're a bees per minute, and I will say Denny is the engineer, so he loves the minute, which is great. But it's we're never doing that actually.
right.
They're great. Pointing out, genitalia are often great characters in some groups, and others, like you would hope that sphecodes would have something interesting, and they almost never do, or they have generic ones that don't help separate out the tricky species. It just depends. So in some cases it's really useful, in other cases not really.
Yep.
We're also wondering if the smokiness of wings holds for males like it did in females as a rough characteristic.
Yes is the answer.
Okay. And then if people are interested in the chat, there's also a conversation going on about favorite microscope lighting.
Yeah. I'll
proceed.
I'll just say I'm a fan of IKEA student lamps because they're cheap. But Denny, what do you use?
I use two desk lamps with 100-watt LED daylight bulbs in them for my general lighting, and then I use a 144 LED ring light on the lens. So I use those, and then I'll use supplemental lighting from a flashlight or whatever if I need it. Lighting is a big thing in doing microscope works, especially in photoing, as Sam well knows.
Yeah.
So
I'll say that at the lab, my light that I use every day is just a modified flashlight from whatever the camping store was 15, 20 years ago. And it worked great. And I've wired it so that it runs off electricity now, but anyway, to each his own. That works well for me. No need to buy the super expensive ones of the past, though, I think is a key point here. Unless you want to.
moving on to texanus, which the S5, S6 color would have both brown and yellow in them, which we've already discussed, relative to brown only and virescens. So the S4 character on texanus and sericeus are swollen. You can see on the photo there, it's the second, how swollen that S4 area is. In text, and it has a triangle that actually has edges. That triangle in this case is iridescent green. It's not always the case that it's iridescent green, but very frequently it is. And a lot of, there again, it's the angle for that interference color. But the triangle will be there. It has relatively sharp edges. If you reference that to the next photo on the right, is of sericeus. S4 is also swollen laterally, probably not as much though as texanus, but there again, it's a relative thing. But you don't have that sharp defined edges of the triangle. Once again, there is some green metallic color in the center there, but you don't have that distinct triangle, whether or not you have the green there and sometimes not. So having the triangle on the center area of texanus is a definitive character, and the absence of the triangle, but it is recessed in the sericeus one. So I find those to be pretty good characters. Both of those have the spine-like hairs on. You can see it on that photo you're on right now, the spine-like hairs on the lateral apical edge of S4. So all of them except for the virescens have those spine-like hairs, all the other three, that is, of the males. As far as the turga goes on texanus and usually sericeus also, you have that metallic green on the side, which is next to the last photo in the whole paper. That usually, if you move the manipulator around, you will see that. There you go, those green areas. You will see that in texanus most of the time, and oftentimes you'll see it in sericeus also. So those are, and I don't know if, I don't have splendens to look at, so I don't know what to say about it. I don't have a male splendens, and the only female I got came from you, Sam.
Okay, I'll show splendens in a minute, and it's really distinctive in terms of its hind femur characteristics. But you might want to continue with the sericeus versus texanus tergite hairs and things.
Right. So between texanus and sericeus, the hairs on T2 through T4, the 2 through 4, the hairs that are originating from the brown area as amber apical translucent edge there. On texanus, they'll be light. As you can hear, they're white hairs cross. And if you go to sericeus, the next photo down, they're black. And those are distinctive. You'll find in virescens, which isn't a character look at for virescens, but sometimes they're mixed, sometimes they're dark. Laterally, they tend to be white, but it's not a character I use, but it is a character I use to separate texanus and sericeus males. So the light crossing the yellow rim from originating from the brown area are light colored, and they're dark colored hairs on sericeus.
I'll also point out that the sternal characters are actually very lovely in those two groups, but again, for those like me who are taking things out of liquid and out of the killing jar and trying to wash them off well, but not do anything else, the abdomen is almost always curled and is extraordinarily frustrating to try and see some of those characters because the curl is so severe. So having these turgle characters is great. And you can see in the specimen I have under the microscope that, yeah, that green sheen does show up a bit too, although, well, even at this level where the light is low, but if I play with this, you can see that there's this green reflective thing. It's subtle, it's not like this, but you can see that greenness. And then if you hone in more, you should be able to see the white hairs. We're running out of time, so I guess I won't try and show you exactly the same thing that Denny showed better in his picture.
Dan, what do we have under the scope?
That's texanus.
Okay.
So maybe we should, just because of time, just jump right now to a splendens male. You want to do that, Denny, or do you have anything else to say?
Yeah, I don't have one, so the main thing on the splendens male, which you can show, is that it's very swollen on the femur.
Yep.
Somewhat swollen, I find, on the other three, but nothing like the one on the splendens. I mean, I've seen pictures of it, so.
Yeah, and there's another little feature too. The problem is I've got foam, not clay, to get the thing to show up here. Oh, okay, I think I've got it. So there's two. So I should also mention that the swollenness is good, but mostly in comparison, because texanus and sericeus also have, compared to virescens or a normal halictid, have pretty swollen femurs, but nothing like this. So I think we give this is about half the distance of this kind of measure, but often it's like, oh, I remember struggling when I was first starting out to figure it out. And now in comparison, it's not a big deal, but it's huge, the femur in splendens. Additionally, what we're going to look for that is more difficult is on the basotarsus of the femur, which is sadly underneath there. There's a ridge that in some of the other species is present, in others I think it is not. And it's hard, it can be hard to see, but it really confirms the splendens. Oh gosh, can I see it in here? I should have, because it's so tricky to see, I should have tried to line this up better earlier. I'm going to pull one more specimen and see if I can, none of their legs are, as usual, everything it curls under, and legs are no exception. I'm looking through my specimens here to see if I got anything with a leg, hind leg sticking out. And what we're looking for, there's a ridge on the, I don't know which side it is on the basotarsus. It gets tricky to figure out sides. I believe we've got it here, right there maybe. Anyway, it's a ridge, and the tip of the ridge, is this possibly also it too? Yeah, I think so. The tip of the ridge is dark. So it's dark like the color of these spurs. So it's darkened, whereas in all the other species that do have ridges, the tip of the ridge is, actually that's the tibia, I think. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, I'm not going to be able to show it in this short amount of time. I should have had it set up because it's so hard to see. Anyway, basotarsus, there's a ridge along at the very end of that ridge, there's an angle going down, and it's brown. Everything else is the same color of the basotarsus, which is a yellowish color like this. So that combination is your ticket when I'm doing IDs. Now, there may be other characters, for example, Denny pointed out patterns with the pronotal collar and in the females, and there may be some other things going on the underside, but I don't use them because these are so available. So I think we actually have covered most of the male and female, which I'm actually a little surprised that we went so fast. I think it's our teamwork, Denny.
Yeah.
That did it. So are there questions, Claire? We're a little bit over.
Yeah, not too many people dropped off. We do not have any questions in the chat. I just said I took notes of things that we wanted pictures of that I'll add to the guide, and that'll be nifty.
Okay.
Here's your opportunity to unmute and ask questions while we are here.
And then after we're done, I can give a tour of my little house where I live.
Yes, please do. Spencer, did you want to talk more about the communal nesting in Vermont, or I can start doing these close-up duties, and Sam can walk you around his tiny house.
We'll do a little walk here.
Not seeing anything, so I'm going to end the recordings, and we'll be here.
All right.